My husband has an estate worth $160 million, along with his house, and it will all be passed down to me. We don't have any children, so everything is mine. My sister-in-law talks about this with a certain pride, and her words echo in my mind. My name is Astrid. I'm 44 years old and work part-time. My husband and I have two sons, one in his senior year of high school and the other a sophomore. My oldest son is preparing for his college entrance exams this year. He's always dreamed of becoming a lawyer and has been working very hard toward that goal. Ever since he was young, my eldest son has wanted to pursue law, probably because of the influence of my older brother, Johan. Johan is a lawyer, and a few years ago, he even started his own law firm, which now has several lawyers working under him. My son grew up admiring my brother's achievements, and he has always been a diligent student, consistently getting excellent grades, even in elementary school. When Johan found out that his nephew wanted to become a lawyer, he was thrilled and gave him a lot of encouragement. My son often tells his uncle, "I'll be a lawyer just like you, uncle." Johan always laughs and replies, "Well, hurry up and become one, so you can follow in my footsteps." Though my brother is married, he and his wife don't have any children. Whenever he visits, he loves spending time with my boys and spoils them. My brother's wife is 10 years younger than him, and she's always been a bit of a difficult person. She never visits our home, and as a result, we don't really have much of a relationship. Johan and I lost our parents when we were young, so when I was getting married, he stepped in as a father figure for me. Shortly after I got married, Johan decided to marry a younger woman. My husband and I were relieved to hear he was getting married, but when we finally met his fiancée, I was shocked by how unhappy she seemed. We expected a cheerful person, excited about her upcoming marriage, but instead, she had a gloomy expression on her face. I tried to be polite and said, "You two make a great couple," but once we were home, I told my husband how puzzled I was by her demeanor. My husband agreed, saying she didn't seem like the most pleasant bride, but he shrugged it off, thinking there was nothing we could do about it. Johan bought a house just before getting married, so my husband and I took our children over to visit and celebrate. The house was absolutely stunning, which didn't surprise me, given Johan's success with his law firm. But when we got there, my sister-in-law was nowhere to be seen. My husband joked with Johan, asking if his wife had already left him. My husband was just teasing, but the look on Johan's face made us both uneasy. Johan explained that whenever something comes up, his wife goes back to her parents' house. That day, she was staying over because it was her mother's birthday. My husband's shoulders slumped, realizing his joke might have been in poor taste. Then, out of nowhere, Johan asked us something that caught us completely off guard. With a serious expression, he said, "If I can't have children, can I adopt one of yours?" I thought he was joking at first, but the look in his eyes told me he was dead serious. I didn't know how to respond, but my husband laughed and said, "Who knows what the future holds? We can talk about it if that time comes. If you really want one of our kids, you're welcome to adopt whichever you like." My husband clearly wasn't taking the request seriously, but I couldn't shake the unease I felt about the idea of adoption and, more importantly, about the state of Johan's marriage. After that, whenever we visited Johan's house or he came to ours, he was always alone. His wife never joined him, and Johan never mentioned her. I chose not to bring it up either. They had been married for over 10 years, and I had nearly forgotten about her. This year, my eldest son got accepted into his dream law school. During a visit to celebrate this achievement, Johan brought up the idea of adoption again. He asked, just as he had before, "Would you consider letting me adopt one of your sons?" He and his wife hadn't been able to have children, so he was revisiting the question. The last time he mentioned it, they had just gotten married, and there didn't seem to be any urgency. But this time, Johan seemed more determined. My husband, still not taking it seriously, replied quickly, "Would you like our eldest son since he wants to be a lawyer?" My husband said it casually, but I was wary. This was a major, life-changing decision for our sons. Although they would be with Johan, their uncle, I couldn't help but worry about how my sister-in-law would treat a child who wasn't biologically hers. I couldn't help but feel uneasy, so I asked my brother, "Is your wife okay with the idea of adopting one of my sons?" He replied with a strained smile, "Don't worry about her. We've already talked it over." While it was somewhat reassuring to know they had discussed it, I still couldn't make a decision right away. I decided it would be best to talk it over with my two sons first. They were old enough to have a say in such a major decision, so I wanted to make sure they were comfortable with whatever choice we made. We didn't go any further with the conversation that day, but just a few days later, I received an urgent call from my brother's law firm. They told me that he had collapsed. I rushed to the hospital, where I found some of the staff from his law firm waiting, looking extremely worried. They explained that my brother had suffered a stroke while at work and had lost consciousness. After I arrived, the staff from the law firm left, but they mentioned they hadn't been able to reach my sister-in-law. I tried calling their landline, but there was no answer, and I didn't have her cell phone number. My husband and our younger son arrived at the hospital later, but despite our efforts, we still couldn't get in touch with my sister-in-law. Eventually, my younger son found my brother's smartphone among his belongings. We unlocked it and managed to find her number. When I called using his phone, she answered with a sharp tone. "I told you not to call me again.
I'll sue you."
She was yelling so angrily that I could barely get a word in. Finally, I managed to say, "It's Astrid, Johan's sister." My brother collapsed and was brought to the hospital. Her tone instantly changed when she realized it was me. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought it was Johan. Did you say he collapsed?" I explained his condition and told her which hospital he was in, but her response shocked me. She said, "I can't come to the hospital right now. I have things to do. But please let me know if anything changes." And then she hung up. I was left wondering what could possibly be more important than her husband lying unconscious in the hospital. It became clear that my sister-in-law wasn't going to be of any help, so we decided to take care of my brother ourselves. My eldest son had just finished his university entrance exams, so he had some free time and offered to visit my brother every day on my behalf. Despite our hopes, my brother never regained consciousness and remained in critical condition. Throughout this time, my sister-in-law never called or visited the hospital, not even once. About a week after my brother was hospitalized, I called my sister-in-law again. This time, she answered the phone almost cheerfully. "What's up? Did he die?" Her callousness left me fuming, but I kept my voice steady as I replied, "He's still alive. Why don't you come to the hospital?" Her response was dripping with irritation as she said, "I'm not a doctor or a healer. There's nothing I can do to help him recover." Her cold attitude made my anger boil over, and I abruptly ended the call. It was then that I started to suspect my brother's desire to adopt one of my sons might have stemmed from his strained relationship with his wife. Perhaps he had given up on the idea of having children with her. When they first got married, I asked my brother how they met, and he mentioned they had met through a marriage counseling agency. Maybe my sister-in-law married him because he was a successful lawyer, and she wanted the lifestyle that came with it. The thought made me even more upset, but when I shared my concerns with my husband, he said something even more disturbing. If Johan dies in this situation, his wife will inherit everything since they don't have any children. Maybe that's why he brought up the idea of adoption again when he came to celebrate our son's success. I couldn't shake the feeling that I should have made a decision back then, but now it was too late. After my brother's visit, I casually mentioned the adoption idea to my sons. To my surprise, my younger son was open to it. Unlike his older brother, he didn't have any specific goals in mind and seemed to think that being adopted by Johan might offer him an easy life. I had expected my eldest son, who admired Johan so much, to be the one interested in adoption. But his response caught me off guard. "I don't want to be adopted. As the eldest son, I want to take care of you and Dad." His words filled me with joy, but I also knew deep down that if anyone should be adopted by Johan, it should be my eldest son, who shared his passion for law. Despite my conflicted feelings, there was nothing I could do. My brother remained unconscious, and I couldn't finalize the adoption on his behalf. I didn't want any part of my brother's inheritance, but I also didn't want my sister-in-law, who seemed to be eagerly awaiting his death, to receive a penny of it. All I could do was hope for my brother's recovery, but sadly, he never woke up. He passed away a few days later, and I had no choice but to inform my sister-in-law. When I called to tell her the news, she responded with an unsettling cheerfulness. "Oh, that's unfortunate. What about the funeral?" I was taken aback by her lack of emotion as she added, "You can handle everything. Just don't make me a pallbearer. I don't want to deal with any of the formalities." I was on the verge of losing my temper, but before I could say anything, she quickly hung up. In the end, my husband and I had to plan the funeral ourselves. The staff from my brother's law firm were incredibly helpful, assisting us in many ways. My husband was also worried about the future of the firm, but it turned out my brother had already made arrangements for its management. Although he was the firm's representative lawyer, he had entrusted the firm's day-to-day operations to someone else, ensuring its continued success even after his passing. The law firm, which my brother had put so much faith in, would continue operating smoothly as a corporation, even after his passing. The turnout at his funeral was overwhelming. So many people attended that the wreaths couldn't all fit in the hall. It was a powerful reminder of how respected and loved my brother was. My sons also helped out during the funeral, but I noticed that my second son seemed particularly frustrated when he saw the prominent figures in attendance, presidents of major corporations, politicians, and other influential people. He mumbled to himself, "I should have been adopted. I didn't realize how incredible Uncle was." Both my husband and I could understand his regret, as he had missed out on an opportunity he hadn't fully appreciated before. As I served as a pallbearer, I noticed that no one asked about my sister-in-law's absence. It was as though no one even knew she existed. My brother and his wife had never had a wedding. They had only gone on a honeymoon, so perhaps even some relatives hadn't been aware of their marriage. As I reflected on the situation, I couldn't help but wish that my brother had never married her. What was the point of a wife who didn't even attend her husband's funeral? I also regretted not allowing my brother to adopt my second son sooner, fearing that my sister-in-law would now claim everything my brother had worked for. With the help of the law firm staff, we managed to complete my brother's funeral. Afterward, I invited everyone to my brother's house for a meal as a way to thank them for their support. "My brother can rest in peace because of all of you," I said, though the sadness in the room was palpable. Just then, my sister-in-law made her appearance, dressed in a garishly bright pink coat. She strutted in with a big smile on her face, as if she had timed her entrance perfectly to coincide with the end of the funeral. I couldn't hold back my frustration and asked her, "Why are you here now after everything's over?" With a loud, almost triumphant voice that everyone could hear, she announced, "My husband's estate, worth $160 million, along with this house, will be passed down to me, his wife. Since we don't have any children, everything is mine." She seemed to be relishing the attention, but to our surprise, the staff from the law firm started laughing. We were all bewildered, not understanding why they found her statement amusing. My sister-in-law, visibly irritated, glared at them and snapped, "What exactly are you laughing about? You're so rude." One of the lawyers, still smirking, responded calmly, "We all know that you're officially divorced. We were aware of the terms of your divorce settlement the day before he collapsed." I was utterly shocked. "What? You were divorced?" I blurted out, unable to hide my disbelief. I looked at my sister-in-law, who had turned as white as a sheet. She was staring at the lawyers with a terrifying expression, her teeth clenched in anger. Another lawyer then chimed in, "Yes, and we also know that you were ordered to pay alimony as part of the divorce settlement. The divorce was a result of your affair, so it's only natural." My sister-in-law, glaring daggers at the lawyer who spoke, retorted, "I'm not required to pay alimony now, am I? There's no one left to pay." She tried to sound confident, but it was clear she was rattled. The lawyer, unfazed, quickly shot back, "Actually, the right to receive alimony is inherited. So, you'll have to pay it to Astrid, as she's now the inheritor." It was in that moment that I fully grasped the situation. I was my brother's sole heir. Since their divorce had been finalized and our parents were no longer alive, everything that had once belonged to my brother now passed to me. My sister-in-law's smugness vanished in an instant as the reality of her situation dawned on her. She was left speechless, no longer in control of the narrative she had so confidently presented just moments before. "So, it's just me left," I thought, as the weight of the situation fully sank in. My sister-in-law seemed to realize this too, and she looked at me with a mix of horror and desperation that made me take a step back. But even with the reality closing in on her, she wasn't ready to give up. She started yelling again, "Don't I get half of the estate now that the divorce is settled?" One of the lawyers, looking exasperated, responded, "Didn't Johann give you a substantial amount when the divorce was finalized? We have a receipt on record." He continued, "Also, the house he purchased before the marriage is not subject to property division." I couldn't help but take some satisfaction in watching her being calmly but firmly lectured by the lawyers. No matter what argument she tried to make, they had a response ready. At one point, she seemed to remember something and chuckled a bit as she said, "But there's the life insurance. I should still be the beneficiary." Her confidence in the midst of a losing battle was almost impressive. She explained that she had changed the beneficiary on Johann's life insurance policy to herself. However, the lawyer quickly shut that down as well. "Johann was meticulous," he said. "I believe he changed the beneficiary when the divorce was finalized. Curious, I searched through my brother's belongings and found the life insurance policy." As I was examining it, my sister-in-law snatched it from me and anxiously scanned the document. Her shoulders slumped in defeat as she handed it back to me. Sure enough, the beneficiary listed was me. Realizing that she was getting nowhere, my sister-in-law finally let her true feelings slip. "I married a lawyer because I thought he was wealthy," she shouted, "but all I got was a small settlement, and now I have to pay alimony." This was a huge mistake. With a grim expression, one of the lawyers responded. Johann felt the same way. He said he regretted ever going to that marriage counselor and considered it the biggest mistake of his life. My brother had never confided such thoughts to me, but it was clear he had been honest with his colleagues. With nothing left to say, my sister-in-law stormed out of my brother's house, leaving behind whatever dignity she might have had. In the days that followed, she was obligated to pay alimony in installments, but without a job, she was unable to do so. Desperate, she started looking for work, but her lack of experience and serious work ethic led her to quit every job almost immediately. She eventually re-registered with a marriage counseling agency in search of another wealthy man, hoping to make quick money by any means necessary. Her scheming didn't go unnoticed. She found a wealthy man and managed to swindle him out of some money, claiming she needed it for their marriage. However, the man quickly caught on to her deceit and reported her to the police. She was arrested for marriage fraud, and the lawyer from my brother's firm informed me of her fate. "To be honest, no alimony was ever paid to you," the lawyer admitted when I went to discuss the situation. He added, "Now that she's been apprehended, it's unlikely that you'll see any alimony payments in the foreseeable future." Alimony wasn't something I was particularly interested in anyway. What mattered more to me was seeing her face the consequences of her actions. I believed my brother would have wanted the same. I urged the police to investigate her thoroughly and to charge her with any other crimes they could uncover, so she would face the full weight of the law. After unexpectedly inheriting my brother's estate, my family moved into the house he had left behind. My husband and sons were thrilled to finally live in such a large, beautiful home after years of living in a cramped apartment. My eldest son threw himself into his law studies with even more determination, inspired by the events he had witnessed and the arguments between the lawyers and my sister-in-law. He admired the way they handled the situation and longed to become a great lawyer like his uncle, even though he was never formally adopted. As for my second son, he was the only one who seemed a bit disappointed. To be honest, he confessed with a half-joking smile, "I wish Uncle had adopted me so I could have inherited everything."